Day 49, Saturday, December 17th. Genesis 50:15-26 NKJV. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "Perhaps Joseph will hate us, and may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him." So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, "Before your father died he commanded, saying, Thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now, please, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father." And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also went and fell down before his face, and they said, "Behold, we are your servants." Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Now therefore, do not be afraid, I will provide for you and your little ones." And he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. So Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's household. And Joseph lived 110 years. Joseph saw Ephraim's children to the third generation. The children of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were also brought up on Joseph's knees. And Joseph said to his brethren, "I am dying, but God will surely visit you, and bring you out of this land to the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Daily Deep Dive. Verse 15. The brothers continue to struggle with the idea that Joseph could really forgive them for the evil they did to him. Yet that is the truth. True followers of God must be able to forgive others. As part of the model prayer that Jesus Christ would later use to teach his disciples to pray, it states in Matthew 6:12, "And forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors." And again in verse 15, "But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." These are incredibly important instructions for you and I. We have not only this incredible example of Jesus Christ, but also examples of the disciple Stephen, Acts 7:60, as well as the ultimate example of Jesus Christ himself, Luke 23:34. Verse 19, to see the incredible maturity of Joseph is amazing. He understood, God was the one in control, God was the one who chooses how to correct others, and they were God's servants, not his. Verse 20, Romans 8:28, a memory verse, tells us, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose." This is not a promise that all things will be easy and that trials won't happen in our lives, but it's a promise that God is in control and ensures that his great purpose is accomplished in the world and in the lives of his people. Joseph understood this as he makes one of the great statements contained in God's word, "But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive." Verse 21, not only was he forgiving, he promised to provide and take care of their families. He also was comforting and spoke kindly to them. Joseph set such an amazing example of who followers of God should be. Verse 23, how amazing that Joseph lived long enough and close enough to his children that he could see and spend time with his great-great-grandchildren. Verse 24 and 25, the UCG reading program shares the following. Joseph also wished to eventually be buried in the land of his fathers, knowing that God would later bring the children of Israel out of Egypt and back to Canaan. He made them swear to carry up my bones from here. Verse 25. However, as a national figure in Egypt, he was first put in a coffin in Egypt rather than being buried in his homeland right away. That Joseph anticipated his burial in Egypt and the Exodus as well is clear from the obligation he bound on the descendants of Israel. Moses would make good on the oath more than 200 years later by taking Joseph's bones out of Egypt during the Exodus, Exodus 13:19. The bones remained with the children of Israel until they entered the Promised Land and were eventually buried in Shechem, Joshua 24:32. The bones of the patriarchs being buried in the land of Canaan may well have symbolized their future inheritance of the promised land, itself representative of God's coming kingdom, and indeed that is where they will awaken at the inauguration of God's kingdom when Jesus Christ returns. Of course, regardless of where our bones might be buried, the saints of God will all be awakened at Christ's return to establish the true promised land, God's kingdom, over all the earth. And, verse 26, in dying at 110 years old, Joseph lived 80 years after coming to power in Egypt. Compare Genesis 41:46. It's clear through the Genesis account that God greatly increased the power and control Pharaoh had over Egypt and the surrounding areas due to the blessings poured out on Joseph. What an amazing story and conclusion to the first book of the Bible.